Vaal School. Taxi horror, 14 learners dead, driver charged, Ramaphosa demands action 12. That's the number I can't get out of my head. 12 learners died at the scene. One scholar transport minibus. One ordinary morning near Vanderbijlpark, in Gauteng, in South Africa's Vaal region. Monday morning, January 19th, 2026, around 7 a.m. Reportedly, it happened on the R553, the Golden Highway. And here's the part that feels like a warning the country ignored. This happened on the same day the South African Human Rights Commission released its final inquiry report on scholar transport in the Northwest Province. That report was not about Gauteng, but the timing felt like a warning.
So many young people in the Vaal. The Human Rights Commission in Northwest was launching its scholar transport report in that province following complaints with the system there.
Now listen carefully, because the number changed. 14. 2 more girls later died from their injuries, according to authorities and confirmed reporting. Hold on to 12 anyway, because those first 12 tell you exactly what failed before that engine even started. This is not a rumor. This is not social media noise. Police and officials confirmed the crash and the deaths. And I'm not here to dramatize it. I'm here to slow it down, step by step, fact by fact. But first, do this for me. Hit like now, because what comes next is heavy. Subscribe, because we won't stop digging until the system behind this is exposed. Here's the question you must keep in your head from the start. How do children die on a school run in a country that already knows this transport system is fragile? Stay with me, because every answer leads to another failure. The school taxi system in South Africa. Context that can't be ignored. Before we go any further, you need to understand how school transport really works in South Africa. Because without this context, the accident in Vaal looks like bad luck. With this context, it looks like something waiting to happen. Every morning, countless families rely on school taxis, also known as scholar transport. Not buses owned by the state, not vehicles run by schools. Privately operated minibuses, often arranged through informal networks, moving through neighborhoods long before most offices open. These taxis exist because they have to. Many families live far from schools. Public transport is unreliable or unsafe. Parents work early. So the school taxi becomes the bridge between home and education. But here's the key detail. The system is fragmented. Some school taxis are registered and inspected. Others operate in a gray zone. Oversight depends on local authorities, provinces, and traffic departments that are already stretched thin. Enforcement is inconsistent, inspections are irregular, and accountability is often reactive, not preventative. Media has reported for years on concerns around school transport, overloaded vehicles, poor roadworthiness, drivers under pressure to make multiple trips in short time windows. All of this happens in plain sight. Understand this clearly. When a child steps into a school taxi, safety depends on multiple layers working together. The condition of the vehicle, the training and licensing of the driver, the enforcement of traffic laws, the monitoring by authorities. If one layer fails, risk increases. If several fail at the same time, tragedy becomes a matter of when, not if. This is the system the Vaal children were part of. Not a one-off arrangement, not an exception. A daily routine replicated across the country. Keep that in mind. Because the accident did not occur in a vacuum, it occurred inside a structure that has been warning the country for years. And now, that structure is under a microscope, and it's not just media pressure. On the same day as the crash, the South African Human Rights Commission released a major inquiry into scholar transport in the Northwest. Different province, same system, the same vulnerabilities. And after Vanderbijlpark, that report suddenly felt less like paperwork and more like a warning. The day of the accident, a verified chronology. According to police updates and verified reporting, the morning school run ended in a head-on collision with a truck. Authorities said the minibus was transporting 16 students to primary and high schools in the south of Johannesburg. 7 people were injured, including 5 students, the driver, and a passenger in the truck. Eyewitnesses described one detail that changes everything. They said the minibus was overtaking other vehicles just before impact. Police said the truck driver would also be questioned as part of the investigation. So the focus is not only the minibus, it's the full chain of decisions on that road. The full reconstruction is still under investigation. Pause right here. Here's what we know. 12 learners died at the scene. The driver was later arrested, and authorities said his professional driving permit, PRDP, was not valid at the time. Here's what we do not know yet. The full crash reconstruction, the final mechanical report on the vehicle, the complete chain of responsibility beyond the driver. And that gap matters, because the story is not finished. It is being built, piece by piece, in an investigation. Emergency response and official confirmation. What happened next? After the crash, the response entered its most critical phase. Emergency services were dispatched to the scene. Paramedics, police, traffic officials. Their first task was triage. Identify survivors, confirm fatalities, secure the area. This is where timelines matter. In any mass casualty incident, minutes can mean lives. But in this case, the severity of the crash meant that for many of the children, help arrived too late to make a difference. Hospitals in the area were alerted.
Some of the parents already arriving here in court this morning. Ahead of that court appearance, it's expected to be quite a brief court appearance, as this will be the first time that the 22-year-old driver will be appearing before.
In the first hours, the injured were taken to Sebokeng Hospital and Kopanong Hospital, according to reports. As of Thursday, January 22nd, reporting said 2 children were still in hospital. At the same time, authorities began the process no family ever wants to imagine: official confirmation of deaths. This process is slow by necessity. Identities must be verified. Families must be notified in person. Schools must be informed. Names cannot be released until confirmation is complete. Officials confirmed 12 learners died at the scene. Police confirmed that an investigation had been opened. Not a routine traffic report, a formal case. As the hours passed, the tone changed. What began as emergency response became a matter of public concern. Questions from journalists, statements from officials, pressure for answers. By the end of that first day, the tragedy had moved beyond the crash site. It was now in newsrooms, government offices, and living rooms across the country. And this is where another critical development occurred. Police later confirmed the driver was taken into custody after receiving medical treatment. That single action signaled something important. Authorities were not treating this as an unavoidable accident. They were treating it as a potential criminal matter. From that moment on, the case entered a new phase, one where decisions made before the crash would be examined just as closely as the crash itself. And that's where the real investigation begins. Families and community. The aftermath that doesn't fade. When the scene was cleared and the sirens stopped, the damage was only beginning to surface. Those first 12 meant 12 families hearing the same sentence in different rooms. Homes that prepared school uniforms suddenly prepared funeral arrangements. And later, more families were pulled into the same nightmare. Classrooms left with desks that will never be used again. In the Vaal area, the impact spread fast. Schools suspended normal activities. Counseling services were brought in. Teachers were forced into roles they are never trained for, helping students process loss. They could barely explain themselves. According to Enka, community leaders described a collective shock. Not anger yet, not protest, shock. Parents gathered outside schools, churches opened their doors, vigils formed without planning or announcements. This matters because tragedies of this scale don't stay private. They alter routines. They change how parents think about safety. They shift trust. Families spoke through representatives, not cameras. Their message was consistent. They wanted answers, not noise. Accountability, not sympathy statements. Listen carefully to that distinction. Public condolences don't prevent the next crash. Clear responsibility might. For many parents in the area, The school taxi system suddenly felt fragile. A service once viewed as necessary now looked uncertain. Questions spread quickly. Who regulates these vehicles? Who checks them? Who ensures drivers are fit to transport children? This is where grief quietly turns into demand. Not revenge, not spectacle. Demand for clarity. Demand for assurance that this would not be repeated, and that pressure didn't stay local for long. The driver, arrest, charges, and what it means. Look at this. The driver survived the crash. He was injured, treated, and later arrested after being discharged from hospital. Authorities also said he was operating without a valid professional driving permit at the time. That is not a small paperwork issue. That is a legal line. And then the case escalated. Prosecutors upgraded the case to include 14 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and driving without a professional license. Read that again. Charged is not convicted. He appeared in the Vanderbijlpark Magistrates Court and abandoned his bail application. The case was adjourned until March 5th for further investigation. But it tells you what the state believes it can argue in court. And it forces the real question. If a driver is not legally authorized to transport pupils, how did this vehicle go out on a school run anyway? Who signed off? Who looked away? Who let it slide until the road collected the price? The investigation widens, beyond one person. As the legal process moved forward, investigators began looking outward, not just at the driver, at the vehicle, at the operators, at the oversight structures meant to prevent exactly this kind of incident. Authorities said investigators launched broader inquiries into the condition of the Scholar Transport minibus, including mechanical assessments, compliance checks, and a review of its documentation. These steps are critical, because many failures don't happen on the road. They happen on paper: missing permits, expired certificates, incomplete inspections. Officials also examined whether the vehicle met safety standards required for transporting children. Seat capacity, maintenance records, modifications. At the same time, transport departments faced renewed scrutiny. Questions were raised about enforcement consistency and monitoring frequency. This is where patterns matter. When similar incidents appear over time, investigations shift from isolated blame to systemic analysis. Are regulations adequate? Are they enforced? Are warnings ignored until tragedy forces attention? This phase of the investigation determines whether outcomes lead to change or simply closure. For now, authorities say the process is ongoing. Findings will take time. Conclusions must be supported by evidence. But one thing is already clear. This case has moved beyond a single crash. It has exposed gaps that many families suspected, but never had reason to confront directly. And that exposure has set the stage for the next development: national attention, political response, and pressure from the very top. That's where this story goes next. National reaction. When the country stops looking away. Once the facts were established, the reaction moved beyond the Vaal region. This was no longer a local tragedy. It became a national conversation. News coverage intensified. Radio discussions opened phone lines. Social media filled with a single theme: safety. As this story hit the national bloodstream, the pressure landed fast on transport authorities, on government departments, on anyone responsible for keeping children safe. And parents everywhere asked the same question: could this happen here too? Civil society groups joined the discussion. Road safety advocates pointed to long-standing concerns. Education activists highlighted the vulnerability of children who rely on informal transport networks. What made this moment different was scale. Children died on a school route, and the country watched the numbers climb. Not because South Africa has never seen fatal crashes before, but because this was a morning routine that turned into a mass grave. That fact carries moral weight. Public statements from officials increased. Each one followed a similar pattern: condolences first, acknowledgement second, promises of action third. But public trust is shaped by memory. Many citizens remembered previous tragedies followed by brief outrage and limited change. This history fueled skepticism. People were no longer satisfied with expressions of sympathy. They wanted timelines, measures, consequences. The conversation shifted from grief to prevention, from mourning to policy. And once that shift happened, the issue reached the highest level of government. Ramaphosa orders action. What was actually committed? President Cyril Ramaphosa responded after national attention reached a critical point.
There's risks. So we therefore, I'm going to be directing the Minister and Transport and all the others to look at how we can save the lives of our children. Our children are the future and they are the most prized possession that we have.
According to official statements and reporting, he called for urgent, coordinated action to improve scholar transport safety after the Vanderbijlpark tragedy. He framed the incident as unacceptable and emphasized that children must be protected. Words matter here, but so does specificity. The president instructed relevant departments to intensify oversight of scholar transport. Transport authorities were directed to review safety compliance. Law enforcement agencies were tasked with ensuring accountability. This was not framed as a suggestion. It was presented as a directive. However, experienced observers immediately asked what this meant in practical terms: increased inspections, stronger enforcement, policy reviews. These measures have been announced before. The difference lies in follow-through. Ramaphosa's intervention elevated the case politically. It signaled that outcomes would be monitored beyond provincial level. It also placed pressure on departments to produce results, not just reports. At the same time, it raised expectations. When action is ordered from the top, failure becomes more visible. This moment represents a crossroads. Either the directive translates into sustained reform, or it becomes another entry in a long list of responses triggered by tragedy. The president's involvement also confirmed something important. The incident exposed vulnerabilities significant enough to concern the entire state apparatus. That recognition alone changes the stakes. What comes next? Legal, policy, and long-term consequences. With investigations ongoing and political attention secured, the focus now turns to outcomes. Legally, the driver's case will proceed through the courts. Evidence will be tested. Responsibility will be determined. This process will take time, and its conclusions will carry implications for future prosecutions involving scholar transport. Administratively, departments are expected to report on compliance levels and enforcement strategies. This includes identifying gaps and addressing weaknesses revealed by the investigation. For operators, scrutiny will increase. Licensing, vehicle standards, and operating conditions are likely to face tighter examination. For some, this may result in suspension or closure. For families, the future looks different. Trust has been damaged. Rebuilding it will require more than assurances. It will require visible change. The broader question remains unresolved. Will this tragedy mark a turning point or fade into precedent? History suggests that attention peaks and then fades. But sustained pressure can alter that pattern. This case has already achieved one outcome. It has forced a national reckoning with how children are transported to school and who is responsible for keeping them safe. What happens next will determine whether the deaths of 14 learners lead to measurable protection for others. And that responsibility now extends far beyond the road where the crash occurred near Vanderbijlpark in Gauteng's Vaal region. It sits with institutions, with enforcement, with leadership, and ultimately with a system that must decide whether it learns or repeats itself. The number that should never happen again. Before we end, come back to the number we started with. 12. The number that hit first. The number that should never happen again. But the final toll was 14. 14 learners who left home for school and never arrived. So don't let this become just another headline. Don't let the country move on without receipts. If this case leads to real oversight, real enforcement, and real consequences, then those learners change something bigger than their own story. If it doesn't, this will happen again, somewhere else, with a different number.